Hey, what's up, everybody? It's your boy Sean Zittel holding it down on FightHype.com as always. And ahead of this Saturday's big-time rematch between Oleksandr Usyk and Anthony Joshua over there in Jeddah in Saudi Arabia for the WBO, WBA, and IBF heavyweight championships of the world, I thought we'd go ahead and take a look back at the top 10 revenge performances in heavyweight championship boxing history. And let's get right started with the honorable mentions. Now, our first honorable mention, Ali's second and third fights with Ken Norton, keep the greatest from making the list 3 times. Yes, Ali was the king of rematches, but these return bouts were not without controversy, as the second fight was ruled a split decision, and the third fight saw Kenny Norton hit the greatest with a number of overhand rights and body shots in what was another very controversial and very great fight. In the end, Ali did avenge his loss and broken jaw to win the series 2-1, but the closeness of these fights keeps them just off of the list. Next up is Wilder Fury 2. Now yes, the Gypsy King did get off the canvas twice at the now defunct Staples Center in fight number 1, but it was ruled a draw and not a defeat. Each of these fights included in our list meet the criteria of A, being for the heavyweight championship of the world, and B, being a reversal of a loss, not a draw, in the first fight. Although certainly Tyson Fury did deliver an all-time great performance in fight number 2, and both fighters delivered an all-time classic in fight number 3, which probably stands as the best heavyweight fight this century, it doesn't quite make the list and has to settle for an honorable mention. Lastly in our honorable mentions is Oliver McCall losing his rematch to Lennox Lewis in a rematch of their WBC heavyweight title fight in 1995. This fight deserves an honorable mention because Lewis did reverse a stunning right-hand knockout against McCall in the second round of their 1994 WBC heavyweight title fight, but the ending of their 1995 rematch was sad as McCall walked dejectedly back to his corner to end the fourth and began sobbing. He was mistakenly sent back out again in the 5th round, where he made it clear to referee Mills Lane with his body language that he no longer wished to fight. Lewis got the win, but never actually dropped McCall in the rematch. Still, it was the beginning of Lewis's true dominance in one of the greatest duos in heavyweight boxing history, Lennox Lewis and Emanuel Stewart, who trained Lennox for the first time ever in his career to win this rematch. Now let's get to the top 10, and coming in at number 10 is Anthony Joshua, who fights in another rematch this Saturday. This time, we'll take it back to 2019 when he fought Andy Ruiz in a rematch that also took place over in Saudi Arabia. Andy Ruiz came in as a replacement less than a month before the fight, as Jarrell Big Baby Miller popped for a cocktail of performance-enhancing drugs. The New Yorker Miller was a big talker, undefeated, and a come-forward fighter with a high punch output, the perfect foil for Joshua, the reigning WBA, WBO, and IBF Unified Heavyweight World Champion, who is making his American debut at Madison Square Garden. Things were going fine in the 3rd round when Joshua's thudding left hook made Ruiz take a seat, but that only made the challenger, Ruiz, more determined as he got up and nearly immediately began to let his hands go with fury, shocking Joshua with his combination of hand speed and punching power as he dropped him back with his own left hook, just as Joshua thought he was going in for the kill. Ruiz then dropped Joshua again in 2019's Round of the Year. A dazed Joshua continued on for 4 more rounds, but he was clearly out of it. Ruiz dropped him twice more in the 7th and completed what was arguably the biggest upset in heavyweight boxing history since James Buster Douglas knocked out Mike Tyson in 1990. In fight number 2, Ruiz came in 15 pounds heavier at 283 pounds, and it showed. He didn't have the same burst and pep in his step as he did in fight 1, and Joshua returned with his boxing shoes on and fought behind his jab as he picked off Ruiz with right hands and checked him with a few left hooks, careful not to overcommit to anything. Despite a few shaky moments like in the 8th round, the big man from London boxed more than well enough to earn a wide unanimous decision to become the 2-time unified heavyweight champion of the world to begin our list at number 10. Joshua would go on to lose the title again nearly 2 years later to Oleksandr Usyk, who he fights this Saturday once again in Saudi Arabia. Number 9, Klitschko Brewster 2. Back in 2004, Layman Brewster ran into the young Vladimir Klitschko, the one who took many more chances than he would later on in his career as he perfected a different style under trainer Emanuel Stewart. And it was beautiful to watch. Through 4 rounds, Klitschko was in control, even dropping Brewster on his signature Steel Hammer 1-2. Things were going great until the 6'6" gold medalist punched himself out and took too many chances, allowing the powerful, stocky, and explosive Layman Brewster to leap up and nail him with a left hook. All of a sudden, just a round after dropping Brewster, Klitschko was spent and badly hurt and could not recover. He collapsed to the ground as the bell rang and referee Robert Byrd did not let him continue to end the 5th round. After this fight, Vladimir's brother Vitaly told him he should retire. But instead, Vladimir rebuilt himself from the ground up and reworked his style with the great Emanuel Steward. Steward, like he had done with Lennox Lewis, took his giant heavyweight and made him cut down on taking chances, maximized the use of his size, and focused in on the tools needed to dominate the division. In the meantime, Brewster destroyed Andrew Golota and had one of the most underrated modern heavyweight classics with Sergey Lihovich, where he lost his belt to the Belarus heavyweight in a 2006 war. The fight was so brutal on Brewster that he suffered a detached retina in his left eye. He couldn't fight for over a year, and by the time he got to the Klitschko rematch 15 months later in 2007, he wasn't the same fighter. The rematch, this time fought in Germany and not in America, was difficult to watch as Brewster was kept in no man's land on the outside by Klitschko's heavy left jab. And going back to the corner, Brewster seemed to know he couldn't pull off what he had done 3 years earlier. That's no discredit to Klitschko, who was as sharp as ever for his revenge. The Ukrainian put on a jabbing clinic, landing it like a power shot and not a rangefinder, as he peppered Brewster with right hands behind it repeatedly. After 6 rounds, trainer Buddy McGirt had seen enough. It was dominant and it was one-sided. It was definitely sweet revenge, and Klitschko would remain the champion for another 8 years. But for Brewster's compromised health, Vladimir has to settle for number 9 on our list. Number 8, Muhammad Ali in his rematch against Leon Spanx, 1978. Spanx, with just 7 professional fights and less than 2 years removed from winning the gold in 1976 at light heavyweight, scored the upset of the year in 1978 by dethroning Muhammad Ali in Las Vegas via a split decision. 7 months later in the Caesars Superdome in Louisiana, Ali summoned up just enough juice in his legs and still flashed enough of his vintage hand speed and combinations to tag the aggressive, younger Spanx repeatedly with a plethora of right hands coming in to become the first ever 3-time heavyweight world champion. The fight earned a 46.7 rating, meaning nearly half the country watched the fight. This rating is topped by only 8 Super Bowls, which is, the biggest television event every single year in the United States. As a matter of fact, no Super Bowl since 2015, the year New England played Seattle, has been able to top that rating. Not a bad audience to secure your redemption in front of. Spanx won the gold in 1976, which made him a 4th consecutive gold medal winning heavyweight champion from the US. He was the final of the 4 before Larry Holmes broke the streak. The rematch, however, was Ali's last great moment, making him the first ever 3-time heavyweight champion of the world. Ali would go on to opt not to fight Larry Holmes or Ken Norton, which gave way to them fighting for the vacant WBC title. But for being maybe the most watched fight in the last 50 years, this one comes in at number 8. Number 7, Bo Holyfield 2, aka the Fan Man fight. This fight on our list was a rematch of the incredible 1992 Fight of the Year, where Bo took the heavyweight titles off of Evander Holyfield. For the rematch, Holyfield sought to bring in Emanuel Steward to tighten things up. Bo did himself no favors in this return bout as he weighed 235 pounds the night he won the title and was 11 pounds heavier at 246 in fight number 2. This fight is mostly known for round 7 when Fan Man came in the ring, which is kind of a shame because it was a great rematch. Not as great as the first fight, but still a hell of a fight nonetheless. It was back and forth through 4 rounds until Holyfield hurt Bo in the 5th to take control in the middle of the fight. His right hand found a home repeatedly, and his left hook knocked Bo's mouthpiece out in the 10th. Holyfield went on to fight a beautiful boxer-puncher fight, tightening up his defense on the inside, and this time he was able to hold his own and even get the better of it in the inside fighting with Bo. Holyfield survived a tough 12th round onslaught by Bo to win a war to once again win the heavyweight title a 2nd time in a record 4 times for the Atlanta, Georgia native. Bo would actually go on to win the trilogy, knocking out Holyfield in 1995, but that fight, which was another great one, was not for the heavyweight title and thus does not make our list. Number 6, Charles Walcott 3. Walcott lost via decision twice to Charles before finally beating him to become, at the time, the oldest heavyweight champion in boxing history at 37 years old. Charles had previously beaten and dropped Walcott in their second fight, but for this third fight, Walcott outweighed Charles by 12 pounds, coming in at 194, and he used his superior middle-aged, grown man strength and savvy to knock out the lighter Charles, who was known as one of the greatest light heavyweights ever coming from Cincinnati. Walcott, like Luis Ortiz today, was thought to maybe actually be older than his listed age, but just a moment before Walcott got the kill, he waved Ezra Charles in to come on in, and then, boom, he landed one of the all-time great step-in left hooks, and he wouldn't be topped until George Foreman broke his record in 1994 at the age of 45, when he knocked out a guy who will appear next on our list. Number 5, Holyfield Moorer 2. In their first fight, Michael Moorer won the heavyweight championship in an upset back in 1994 by getting off the canvas with an inspiring Teddy Atlas in his corner. This rematch was a matchup of a former light heavyweight champion and a cruiserweight champion for the heavyweight championship of the world. It was a unification of Holyfield's WBA title he had won from knocking out Mike Tyson the year before and Moore's IBF title. This time around, Michael Moorer did not have Teddy Atlas in his corner for the rematch, but instead had Freddie Roach, who had him fight a more aggressive game plan. Moorer, like Bo in the Holyfield rematch, did himself no favors by weighing 9 pounds heavier at 223 pounds in the rematch. Moorer actually got off to a decent start and buzzed Holyfield in the final 15 seconds of round 1, and he won the second round. The fight was a war until the 5th, where Holyfield capped an incredible combination with a thunderbolt of a right hand to drop Moorer, leading to 5 knockdowns total. Moorer made it through the 6th and kept going, but got dropped again twice in the 7th and twice in the 8th to end it. Holyfield exploded with brutal combinations and right uppercuts. Freddie Roach wouldn't let Michael Moorer, who fought like a warrior, out for the 9th round. Despite Holyfield usually being the smaller man and smaller puncher, that wasn't the case in this fight, as his advantage in physical strength and punching power was apparent. Moorer was forced into a war, a fight that favored Holyfield, and he wasn't able to work his southpaw magic like he did in fight 1. This was an underrated war and probably the most underrated fight on our list here at number 5. Number 4, Johansen Peterson 2. In the first fight, Mario Johansen dropped Peterson like a ton of bricks with a straight right hand off a little touched left hook to set it up. Peterson was unable to recover and got dropped 7 times total in the 3rd round, all by Johansen's right hands. This made Johansen Sweden's most famous man, a mantle now held by PewDiePie, and also a shout out to Otto Wallin, Sweden's current top heavyweight, who gave Tyson Fury hell in 2019. But I digress. Peterson had to wait nearly a full year before he got his crack at redemption, and he would not be denied. Peterson, with the same peekaboo style as Mike Tyson, had the same kind of explosiveness out of the stance that Cus D'Amato had taught him in Brooklyn. Peterson, with 2 monster left hooks in the 5th, took Johansen out in the rematch. Johansen was looking to sit on the right hand again, but Peterson solved it by stepping inside with his left hook. With the win, Peterson became the first ever 2-time heavyweight world champion, along with being at the time the youngest heavyweight champion in boxing history, a feat that would only be topped by his trainer Cus D'Amato's fellow pupil, Mike Tyson, in 1986. They fought one more time in 1961, with Peterson surviving 2 knockdowns in the first to eventually knock out his Swedish rival in the 6th. But it was the rematch and not the rubber match that would give Peterson his sweetest moment of revenge. Number 3, Ali Frazier 3, the Thrilla in Manila. Their first fight was the fight of the century on March 8, 1971 from Madison Square Garden. Somehow, due to Ali being stripped from his refusal to take part in the Vietnam War, this fight featured 2 undefeated lineal heavyweight champions. What ensued was possibly the greatest fight of all time, as Ali rushed out to a lead behind his beautiful 1-2s and dazzling hand speed. But Smokin' Joe caught on fire as the fight went deeper in rounds, and by the 15th, Frazier landed the most famous left hook in boxing history, when he dropped Ali in the Garden to give himself the defining moment he needed to win the fight of the century. They would have their rematch less than 3 years later in 1974, but that was just another fight, nothing iconic. Ali was fresh off splitting 2 fights with Ken Norton, and Frazier was only 1 fight removed from being demolished by Big George Foreman. Ali went on to win a 12-round decision in a non-title fight, the only of their 3 fights not to be fought for the heavyweight world championship. It wasn't until October of 1975 in Manila, the Philippines, that Ali would have the kind of victory that could equal Frazier's win over Ali in their first fight. If their first fight isn't the greatest heavyweight fight of all time, then maybe their third fight is. Either way, fights number 1 and 3 between these two legends stand as 2 of the top 5 fights in heavyweight boxing history. Just like in fight 1, Ali got off to a fast start with his beautiful hand speed and combinations, though this time he was more comfortable fighting off of the ropes than he was in their first fight, learning from his fight with Foreman and Zaire. But eventually, Frazier dragged Ali down to the pits of hell again and made this legendary cap to boxing's most famous trilogy, a war of attrition, where both men fought to near dehydration and complete exhaustion. Ali would have to survive being hurt multiple times, and along with landing his right hand again and again, he used it as a trap to use his own left hook to give Joe his own medicine time and time again. With his fighter struggling to see, the great Eddie Futch famously pulled the plug on Joe Frazier before letting him out for the 15th and final round. An exhausted Ali put his arms up in triumph and later that night would claim that he was the greatest heavyweight of all time and Joe Frazier was the second greatest. With both fighters completely spent, it should have been both guys' swan song. Winning this grudge match allowed Ali to come out on top of boxing's greatest trilogy and is one of the reasons why he's the greatest. Number 2 on the list, Hasim Rahman versus Lennox Lewis, Part 2. Rahman in Fight 1 used his double jab to make a lethargic Lennox Lewis back straight up in a straight line and boom! Hasim Rahman landed a jackpot right hand to become the heavyweight champion of the world. This was the last time an American held the unified and lineal heavyweight championship of the world. In camp and just a few weeks before getting to Carnival City, Lewis was filming Ocean's 11 and gave us a tease of fighting Vladimir Klitschko in the film, even though he'd wind up fighting his older brother, Vitaly, in one of the greatest heavyweight fights of the new millennium. The rematch had a great build-up as Lewis wasn't sure if he'd get his chance, as Rahman truly wished to fight Mike Tyson instead. The two even had a physical altercation at the ESPN studios and promotion for the fight. Lewis got his opportunity 7 months later in Las Vegas, and boy did he take advantage of it, delivering perhaps the most brutal two-piece in boxing history. With the win, Lennox Lewis eventually secured himself in boxing history alongside Rocky Marciano as the most notable heavyweight champions to retire, having beaten every single man they ever faced. Sorry Tyson Fury, we're not counting your retirement just yet. The fight might not be as famous as Ali Frazier 3 or Bo Holyfield 2, but it is a picture-perfect example of revenge being taken in a rematch, and for that reason, it ranks number 2 on our list, just behind another Lewis. Number 1 on our list, Joe Louis's rematch with Max Schmeling, 1938. A confident Max Schmeling scouted Joe Louis well and saw that he kept his left hand low and felt that if he could hold up to the firepower of Louis long enough, he'd get his chances to deliver his best punch, his right hand. As the fight progressed, Schmeling began to land some devastating right hands. Louis was not able to adjust defensively and sought to fight fire with fire. Schmeling knew he couldn't fight punch for punch with the great Louis, so instead he sniped with the right, hurting Louis in the 4th and then dropping him with a hellacious barrage. The American got up and stayed in the fight and even had some moments. It was no one-sided fight, making it the fight of the year in 1936. But ultimately, Schmeling's right hand was the weapon of choice that night and he finished Louis in the 12th. It took only less than 3 minutes, however, for the Brown Bomber to exact his revenge as he knocked out the German in the very first round at Yankee Stadium in the Bronx. This time, Louis drove Schmeling to the ropes repeatedly and didn't give him the same distance to set up his right hand as he dropped him with a brutal combination along the ropes. Then Louis gave Schmeling his own medicine, a right hand over the top of Schmeling's low left hand. Then he finally finished off a dazed Schmeling with a beautiful combination to the body before dropping in an iconic right hand that completely turned around the jaw of Max Schmeling. Schmeling carried himself like a gentleman, and the two would become close friends throughout their lives, but the message was sent to Hitler and Nazi Germany. No superior race, and this was a foreshadowing of World War II. The message was also sent to the boxing world at the time. Greatest heavyweight ever, greatest fighter ever, and to this day, the greatest revenge knockout in heavyweight boxing history. Thank you guys for watching and checking out the list. We'll keep it locked in throughout this week on FightHype. We'll see this Saturday if Anthony Joshua can crack the top 10 with a performance against Oleksandr Usyk and once again win back his heavyweight titles. But beyond that, let us know what you guys thought in the comments below. Did we get the list right? Did we get the top 10 right and just had the wrong order? Let us know in the comments below and keep it locked in on FightHype. Thanks everybody for tuning in and checking this out.